Welcome to Branding the Experience, where we discuss ways how we can create environments where employees actually want to come to work and customers want to keep coming back. Hi, I'm your host for Branding the Experience, Ken Bader, and we have an awesome show because we have a great guest again. And this is a really great guest, a gentleman that I had the opportunity to meet several times at the New Media Summit. He has a podcast as well, so let me tell you a little bit about him. It's Thom Singer. And he believes that all opportunities come from people. As a keynote speaker, he combines a robust mix of actionable content with a high energy delivery style. He is the author of 11 books. That's at least 9 or 10 more than I do, so we want to learn from him. On the power of business relationship, networking, presentation skills, legal marketing, and entrepreneurship, and is the host of the popular Cool Things Entrepreneurs Do podcast. Thom, welcome to the show.
Hey, Ken, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. So before we get into some branding the experience ideas that I'm sure you've heard on your show, let's talk a little bit about your show, Cool Things That Entrepreneurs Do, because our audience needs to listen to that show as well. How did that get started, and how did you get the idea for that brand name?
So it started about 5.5 years ago. I was a pretty avid blogger, and I had a series on my blog for about a year, maybe longer, on Fridays called Cool Things My Friends Do. And after having blogged at that time for, 8 years or something like that, I realized, I could pontificate all day long, but who cares? I'm not some guru, thought leader, whatever. But I have a lot of friends who do really interesting things. So whether it was renting a Harley and driving the whole East Coast, or whether it was launching a book or anything in between, every week I would write something. And what it caused me to do was I had to watch what people in my life were doing. And so I was doing that. So then I was kind of in a rut, and I was at a conference, and somebody said, if you ever are in a rut, interview 50 successful people, and you have to come out the other side better and out of your rut. And so I thought, I'll do that, and I'll do 50 blog articles. And then somebody said, you should start a podcast. I didn't even know necessarily what podcasts were. So I did some research, and someone's like, you should take Cool Things My Friends Do and make it a podcast. But I thought, who wants to listen to a podcast about what my friends do? Plus, I want access to people I don't know. So I combined the two, and Cool Things Entrepreneurs Do was born. And now it's been 510 or more episodes over 5 years.
Wow, that's awesome. I always love the backstory of businesses and shows and all the cool things that people do. And you're right on. I don't even blog anymore because, I find, nobody wants to listen to me rant. They want to hear from other people. And, I've learned so much either on Branding the Experience or Cool Culture Corner from so many great thought leaders like yourself. So the question, go ahead.
The thing I've learned from this process of having the podcast and now having interviewed close to 500 people is success leaves clues. And so if you get to listen to people who've had success, they can't help it. They have to, when they tell you their story, they leave a nugget, a theory, an idea, a concept behind. Right. And if you're there picking them up, you're going to be better.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm certainly at least a little bit sharper since I started this show. Speaking of shows, given the title, Cool Things That Entrepreneurs Do, what are some of the coolest things that you've heard or seen entrepreneurs do?
Well, everybody from solopreneurs like myself who have some sort of a practice. I'm a professional speaker and corporate trainer. I've interviewed people who are coaches. I've interviewed people who are like shamans. I've interviewed people who are CEOs of big companies. The first one that comes to mind is like Ghirardelli Chocolate. That's, a 150-year-old brand or something like that.
Right. And I love their chocolate.
Right, exactly. And everything in between. And so I just encountered a lot of people who are doing really interesting things. And at the end of the day, the coolest thing that entrepreneurs do is when they are able to impact the world in some way, whether they're creating jobs, whether they're inspiring other people, whether they're giving back to the community. I ask everyone who comes on my show, what do they do to give back to the greater good? And that's some of the greatest things I've heard.
Yeah, yeah, great point. I see some of the same things myself, and I truly believe, and I've said this before on this show, that all of the world's problems, or at least most of the world's problems, can be cured through entrepreneurship. We just can't
Yep.
survive without small businesses and new small businesses coming out there. And as a side note, I'm personally seeing, and I'd like to hear your take on this. This is a little bit off the subject, but I've seen so many amazing millennial entrepreneurs and executives. There's this unfortunate stigma on millennials, but I see millennials really doing things right, and frankly, really understanding this branding the experience concept, even if it may be subconscious. I don't know if you realize that or you witness that yourself.
You bring up an interesting point that there's this stigma that a lot of them have, and I think it's kind of died out. But for so
Yeah.
many years, everybody tried to say, "Oh, they're lazy. They live in their parents' basement. They're entitled." That's not what I've found. And in fact, what I've found in my research is that the millennials, I know, brace yourself for this, they're human beings, and human beings haven't changed that much over the years. You can go back for thousands of years, back to Aristotle and Plato. The older generation always thought the younger generation was lazy. They always thought they
Mhm.
didn't have the same sort of joie de vivre that they had.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that as the millennials, everybody said, oh, the millennials, it's going to be the death of the suburbs because the millennials all want to live, urban. They want to live in high rises downtown. So
Mhm.
I live in the suburbs. I live in a neighborhood. I don't live on the golf course, but I live on a neighborhood that has a golf course, and it's as suburbia as you're going to get. There's 2 elementary schools, there's a junior high, there's a supermarket, there's a Starbucks. Every house that sells in my neighborhood sells to a couple who's about 35 years old, boom, right in the millennial age bracket,
Yeah.
with 2 kids. So yeah, they all wanted to live urban until they had kids, and then they want a good school and they want a place to have a dog. You know what? They're just like every other
Yeah.
human that ever lived. And so I think that they've gotten a bad rap, but I think a lot of people have made a lot of money trying to separate the generations, turn the baby boomers and the, the baby boomers against the millennials, and now trying to turn everyone against Generation Z. And they've totally ignored Generation X. I live in that middle generation that nobody talks about.
Yeah.
And yet, we're all just human beings. We all want the same things. We just have grown up with a little bit of different technology, but it doesn't change our soul.
I agree with you 100%, Tom. I'm part of that Gen X that nobody talks about. I actually want people to start talking bad about Gen X just so I don't feel left out. I feel like it's apathetic or something. But one
Yeah,
point.
there's less of us. There's less people, so it's not
Yeah.
as exciting to talk about because the millennials and the baby boomers, they both want you to talk about them, and they make up the majority of the population. So
Yeah,
why talk about us?
those are two huge generations. And you mentioned the whole going back to Aristotle. I always use the example of the change in generations has been exacerbated between baby boomers or among baby boomers, Gen X, and millennials because we went from the industrial age to the technology age or the information age. And I always say, I bet you back in the days when we went from the agricultural age to the industrial age, you had two different generations that went at it because there were different ways of doing things. And now it's just exacerbated because in the information age, things move so quickly.
And my dad, my father, he was 52 years old when I was born. So I'm now in my 50s. My dad was born in 1914, and he lived to be 99 years old.
Wow.
He just missed my 100th birthday. And one time we were talking about the generations, and this was, I don't know, 10 years ago. He was like 95 or something. And we were talking about the sort of the generation, how different the millennials were. And he goes, I don't buy it. And I'm like, Dad, it's true. There's all these people writing books and all this. He goes, go read the Bible. Do you know what stories you're going to find in the Bible? You're going to find stories about lust and greed and wars and famine. You're going to find.
Now, a word from our sponsor, Bader Training and Consulting. BTC is the creator of the B plus C plus S formula. Our clients that implement that formula increase their net income by 124% and grow their business by 17% on average. The best place to start working with Bader Training and Consulting is with our B plus C plus S audit. The service pinpoints issues as well as attributes of your business's unique brand, culture, and strategy. Learn more or sign up for a B plus C plus S audit at www.btcinc.net/BCS-audit.
Go back and you read the Bible and you're going to find stories. You're going to find stories about lust and greed and wars and famine. You're going to find stories about marriages that worked and marriages that didn't work. You're going to find stories about political leaders that were loved and political leaders that were hated. Does that sound familiar? My dad said, all you have to do is turn on the news. It's the same stories today. So every generation, all people think they're so different, but the stories that were told 2,000 years ago are still playing out today. People haven't really changed.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. When I talk to my dad, we don't go all the way back to the Bible, but he talks about, being in his 20s and the 60s and all the things that happened and two different sides and how everybody operated. So, nothing really that new here. I think it just gets exacerbated.
And everybody thinks the experience that we're having right now with what's going on in Washington, D.C. with our government is so horrible. And yet 3 years ago, the musical Hamilton came out.
Mm-hmm.
And all it did was remind us that our founding fathers were at war. Hamilton was constantly bad-mouthing and at war with Thomas Jefferson and vice versa. Right. They say that Hamilton founded the New York Post so that he could write stories and get them published so he could badmouth the people he hated politically. And then the sitting vice president shot him. So, I mean, we've always had problems. At least, Pence hasn't shot anybody that I know of. So, we still have all the same problems going on that we had, 200 years ago.
Yeah. Hopefully he won't shoot anybody. I'd hate to see that, but see, this is one of the great things about branding the experience. We have discussions sometimes that have very little to do with branding, but are still important and very, very interesting. But going back to the idea of branding the experience, and one thing that may be different, whether it's for millennials or baby boomers or who you speak about, is that I believe that customer service, good customer service, isn't enough anymore. That people don't want just service, that they want a complete experience. Case in point, you can go to a restaurant and get very good service and even good food, but if the overall experience isn't right, maybe I'm not coming back. And with all the entrepreneurs that you speak to, can you give us some examples of some great experiences that you've heard or witnessed?
Well, I think you hit on it right in what you said there, is that, doing good work is just the ticket into the game. It used to be that if you did good work and responded to your customer, you would win because other people weren't. Well, now everybody is, and everybody's getting a Yelp review right away afterwards or something equivalent. The internet's, if you're schlocky in the work that you do, it's going to go away. Mm-hmm. And, on my show, when I interview people about I talk about when I go out and speak, I work with teams about how do you get across the gap from potential to performance. And one of the things that entrepreneurs tell me when I interview them is one of the ways you get across that gap is the experience that you give the people who you interact with. And it's not just, they called and we answer the phone on the second ring. Yeah. The experience that you give them happens before, during, and after the service that you provide them. So that's why it's so important that you have ways to constantly be following up, starting communities. I think some of the best examples, and this can be in every industry, if you can get people to buy into some sort of an online community and have chats about your products and help other customers solve problems, all of a sudden they become more loyal to you, right? If they're engaged with you. And the way you get people engaged is, you've got to be engaged back. You can't just be collecting money. You've got to be investing in that community and cultivating it.
Yeah, I love that. A lot of the clients that I work with are in the financial industry, which, some people may think can be a pretty boring way of doing business. And it can be if you let it. But fortunately, I see a lot of these small community banks and small credit unions, doing some great things with video, even Facebook and so forth, that is truly engaging their customers or members. And it makes a lot of sense. And it even goes back to the days when I started in banking, where we talked about what you mentioned, which is the after. The before, we do a great job possibly of messaging and visual branding to draw people in. And maybe we even do a great job of the experience when the customer is right in front of us. But, what really sets us apart is the after. We always had an example when I worked at my first bank, in that when somebody had a problem, maybe it was a problem with the checking account or a problem with a loan or credit card, and they came in and they wanted to bitch, we were reminded that, what? That's just another part of the sales process. We offered them something. We told them it was going to work in a certain way. It obviously didn't, so we have an opportunity to make it even better. And you have that opportunity where if we not only make it right, but make it even better, say, you know what, we're going to give you free interest for this month. Or, you know what, we're going to give you, I don't think we do this anymore, but we're going to give you 200 free checks. That used to be important in the 90s. Now, nobody uses checks. Or we give you the free app or something. That people can actually leave, happier than if they didn't even have a problem. Are you seeing any of that?
Yeah, I think all that stuff is important. I think one of the problems is that sometimes people overdo it, right?
Yeah.
I take my car in to be serviced, and I get like a text, and then 65 billion emails, and then 9 more texts, and then a call from somebody wanting me to take a survey. I am so over taking customer service surveys. I check out and they circle something saying, hey, go home and log on and take this survey and you have a chance to win a $1,000 gift certificate. I used to do those. I've probably done hundreds of those. I never won.
Yeah.
It's like, so I've given up. I don't take people's surveys. And I think, it used to be if we surveyed people, care about what you have to say. Now, if we survey people, it's just something else people have to do. So you have to be more creative in the way you engage people. I go to a lot of conferences, both as a speaker and as an attendee. And as a speaker, you used to get from the meeting planner, like these spreadsheets that would say, you had 500 people in the audience, 450 filled out the survey after your keynote, and 300 of them left comments. And they would put it all into a spreadsheet and send it to the speaker. So you get to see best speaker ever, really touched it, loved this story, 5, whatever it was. Now, when I even see those surveys, most of them don't get sent to me because most of my clients say their surveys are crap because they've all moved online and they're emailing people. And they're getting like 15% of their 500 people, if that, maybe 10%, to fill out the survey. And then they're just clicking how many stars. So you'll find out you were 4.8, but nobody says what they liked about it anymore. So I think we've over-surveyed people to death. Yeah. And when it really comes to that experience, we can't rely on those click here and take my survey anymore because people aren't doing it.
Yeah, great point, because I'm pretty loyal to Delta and Crown Plaza hotels when I'm working with clients or speaking or so forth. I use them almost exclusively, and frankly, they both give me a great experience. Shout out to Delta and Crown Plaza. I'm very happy with them as a consumer, but I always get the damn survey, within a day or two. How do we do at our hotel? How was your flight? And it's actually a small withdrawal in the emotional bank account, because as I'm sure you experience, you're busy and all of a sudden you see something come over the phone. You're like, okay, is it a client? Is it my wife? Is it something important? No, it's Crown Plaza asking me for my opinion again. If I'm unhappy, I'll let you know. And to also segue into conferences, because I want to hear a little bit about that before we wrap up, is I find the same thing. I spoke at a very large conference for financial institutions, about 1,000 people, and I asked for the feedback from the meeting planner. Never got anything, because I want to learn, okay, what didn't they like? What did I screw up? Did I swear when I shouldn't have swore? Did I make a joke that was improper? Because I like to add comedy, and I know you like to do that too. I want to hear that feedback. But for a conference that I run every year, we don't do any electronic surveys or anything like that. This is one time where paper actually works better. We actually hand everybody a
Actually,
survey.
clients,
Yeah, I hand them a
a lot of
survey.
my clients don't take paper.
Yeah, and you know what? Maybe there's only 50 people in the seminar, but we get about 35 of them back. And yeah, it takes a little bit more work that you got to type the stuff up. But you know what? People will actually write on the back of those what they liked, what they didn't like, and they'll be very specific because it's right then and there.
Yeah, like I said, a lot of my clients are going back to paper. They hate to do it
Yeah.
because they're not modern, they're not techie. They think the millennials will hate them or whatever, but they're getting the information.
Yeah, exactly. So tell us a little
I
bit.
tell people technology for the sake of tech is better.
Yeah, I completely agree. So you are a well-known speaker out there. Tell us a little bit about some of the presentations and speaking that you do out in the public.
So I've been doing this as my source of income for 11 years. So I'll speak about 40 to 50 times a year for corporations and for associations. And I'll either do their opening keynote at the conference, or I'll go into a company to do like a sales kickoff, or I have a niche where I can serve as a master of ceremonies for a multi-day event. Yeah. And that actually ties right into what your show's about, because the associations that hire me to be their master of ceremonies are really looking at changing up the experience of the people who are in the audience, because a lot of associations, to save money or because they want to honor some board member, let the board chair or someone else be master of ceremonies. Or if it's a company having a customer conference, they'll get the head of sales to be it because he's got a gregarious personality. But the problem is that everyone already knows that person. So there's no discovery. Plus that person probably isn't a trained master of ceremonies. And while they're at the conference, they have other jobs to do. So the master of ceremonies thing becomes like, I got to get on stage, and they run on and they do it. Yeah. I'm there to watch everything that's going on, to bring people in, to bring some level of levity, to recap, and to encourage people to take advantage of the number one thing of why people go to a conference, and that's for the networking. So I call myself the conference catalyst. Yeah. When I'm at an event, people engage more, and that's what live events are all about. So the people who I work for, the associations mainly that I work for, they're really interested in how do we change this experience and make it more about the audience. If you say, hey, we use an internal person because it saves us money, that's not about the experience. If they say, hey, we've invested in this person because it makes your experience better, that says this conference is all about you. Yeah, great point.
Ironically, I was just hired a few months ago to be the Masters of Ceremony to a brand new conference. And they actually wisely saved a little bit of money on the speakers. They paid me to be the MC. And even when a speaker didn't quite come off so well, we were able to take a break, do some networking. I told a couple of jokes. People laughed. They felt good about it. And the big thing with an MC is they brand the experience by keeping everything on time. That was one of the things that we heard in the feedback, is that, wow, if you said that we were having lunch at 12 o'clock, at 12:01, we were grabbing plates. That was great. But to wrap things up, can you tell our audience if they want to have you speak, learn more about cool things that entrepreneurs do, the podcast, how can they find you?
So I'm easy. You just find me at thomsinger.com. That's THOM. It's like Thomas without the ass. THOMSINGER. So just Thom at thomsinger.com is my email. I'm Thom Singer on all the social medias. And so the best way to find me is through my website or through any social media platform.
Perfect. Thom, thank you so much for being a guest on our show. We had a great conversation, and you gave some really, really great tips that our audience are really going to enjoy.
Have a good day.
And thank you to all of you that joined us for Branding the Experience. And as always, here's hoping that you brand the experience at a very high level for all those you serve. Take care. Thank you for watching Branding the Experience. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you're looking for a speaker on branding the experience, on workplace culture, or on business strategy, I have a number of different options for you. And my approach is always to entertain first, engage second, and educate third. It's a formula that leaves my audience not only laughing and enjoying, but also learning. So if you want a great speaker on branding, culture building, or strategy, I'd like to hear from you. Simply send me an email at kbator, BATOR, at btcinc.net, or to learn more about the presentations that I've done that have been successful in the past, go to www.btcinc.net.